Picture this. You're standing on site, mud is literally up to your ankles, and you are staring down a massive project delay.
Oh, yeah, we have definitely all been there.
Right. You've got this absolute mountain of ambiguous, just totally contradictory paperwork on your desk. Contractors are pointing fingers at each other over, say, a botched concrete pour.
And let me guess, the client is blowing up your phone right this very second.
Exactly. They are rapidly losing whatever little patience they had left. I mean, it is the absolute ultimate nightmare scenario for anyone in the construction industry.
It really is.
But what if you could stop that nightmare before the first shovel even hits the dirt? Welcome to our deep dive into mastering conflict avoidance and dispute resolution in construction.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're pulling our insights directly from the official RICS Practice Information Guide. That's the first edition. And our mission for you on this deep dive is really simple. We want to equip you with practical, field-tested strategies to stop disputes before they start and navigate them effectively when they inevitably do.
Because they always do.
They always do. Now, I have spent enough time out there in the mud with a hard hat on to know that conflicts in construction are, well, they're about as common as bad weather.
That's a good way to put it.
I really want to know the practical boots-on-the-ground steps to protect my projects. And you have been navigating these waters for years, seen all the spectacular successes and the multi-million-dollar catastrophic failures.
Oh, I've seen a few of those, yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this.
The staggering amount of conflict that actually happens in construction.
Yeah, exactly. Why is understanding these rules of engagement basically a superpower for a surveyor?
It truly is a superpower, and it's a pleasure to guide you through this today. You see, disputes in construction, they almost never spring out of thin air.
Right.
They don't just happen because two people suddenly decided they don't like each other over morning coffee. They almost always originate from one single, persistent, and frankly, entirely avoidable issue.
Which is?
Ambiguity. Specifically, an unclear definition of risk at the very, very beginning of the project.
So nobody really knows whose fault it is when things go wrong.
Precisely. A surveyor who proactively manages a project, someone who anticipates future work and raises concerns early, they are actively dismantling that ambiguity. Good management is the ultimate conflict avoidance tool.
Just getting ahead of it.
Getting ahead of it, yeah. It's about carefully planning the strategy for executing a project so that everyone knows exactly who is holding which risks before anyone even steps foot on the site.
So it's about drawing lines in the sand before the tide comes in.
That is a great analogy, yes.
Let's look at the absolute beginning then. If ambiguity is the main enemy here, the danger zones have to be in the paperwork. When you look at how projects actually get off the ground, what are the biggest traps you see in contract documentation?
Oh, the absolute biggest trap is the overwhelming temptation to start the work before the ink is dry on the contract.
Yeah, bing the gun.
Exactly. There's a massive systemic risk in the industry of operating under what we call a letter of intent, rather than just waiting for a fully executed contract. I see it all the time.
Yeah, the client is super eager. The contractor has a tight window of availability.
And everyone just says, hey, let's get a letter of intent signed and start digging.
Right, because it feels like you're keeping the momentum going. You're showing the client some actual progress. Why is that such a bad thing?
Because it's a mirage. All a letter of intent really does is delay dealing with the key issues between the parties.
It just kicks the can down the road.
It kicks the can down the road, exactly. It pushes the hard, uncomfortable conversations about risk allocation to a point where you might already be in an active conflict.
Give me an example of how that blows up.
Okay, imagine you start digging under a letter of intent and immediately hit unexpected bedrock.
Oh, man.
Right. Who pays for that?
Yeah.
If you don't have a full contract detailing ground condition risks, you are instantly in a dispute.
Because nobody agreed on it beforehand.
Exactly. You have to get the actual contract signed. And when you do, you must avoid relying on just volumes of general copy-pasted specifications.
Boilerplate stuff.
Yeah, throw the boilerplate out. Good documentation means capturing the specific details and the unique risks of your exact project.
Okay, so ditch the boilerplate specs, have the hard conversations up front, and actually tailor the contract to the specific site. But let me push back a bit here, using my boots-on-the-ground persona for a second.
Go for it.
Even with a perfect bespoke contract, reality on site changes every single day. The RICS guide emphasizes something called contemporaneous record keeping.
Yes, vital concept.
Now, I know we need to log what gets built, obviously, but the guide makes it sound incredibly intense.
It is intense, and for very good reason. Look, many disputes are ultimately resolved months or even years later by looking backward at the records kept during the project.
Just digging through old files.
Yeah, you need to track the daily realities, labor, plant, materials. But crucially, you must track what is called resource movement.
Wait, hold on. Log every single resource movement contemporaneously.
Mm.
I mean, I'm out there in the freezing rain trying to get a foundation poured before a storm hits, and you want me stopping to write down that the telehandler moved from sector A to sector B?
I know.
How is that remotely realistic on a chaotic job site?
I know it sounds like bureaucratic torture when you're in the thick of it. I really do. But let me give you a scenario. Let's say a change occurs on site, and it always does.
Every day.
Right. Maybe the client decides to change the design of a load-bearing wall. If you don't document exactly how that change impacted the movement of your labor and machinery right then and there, you are totally defenseless later.
Because I won't be able to prove why we slowed down.
Exactly. You cannot try to reconstruct the ripple effects of a delay 3 months after the fact from memory.
Yeah, I definitely won't remember if the forklift was idle because of the design change or just because they had a flat tire.
No one would remember that. The party with the best contemporaneous records almost always wins the dispute.
That is a harsh reality check, but I hear you.
Yeah.
He who has the best paperwork wins. And I imagine this ties directly into managing the client too. Because if I'm the surveyor on the ground, keeping these meticulous, frankly annoying records and communicating these daily changes, it means my client isn't just operating in the dark.
Precisely. Maintaining good, data-driven communication prevents the client from incorrectly assuming that you, as the surveyor, have total godlike control over every single aspect of the project.
Including the weather and the global supply chain, right?
Exactly. Clients always seem to think we can just wave a magic wand and make steel appear.
So being proactive with this daily data prevents those massive, nasty surprises when it is time for the final account valuations.
That's the exact goal. If you are reporting regularly on time and cost, projecting the final account costs based on those daily gritty realities, you completely avoid the sudden relationship-destroying shock of reporting a substantial delay right near the end of the project.
Because they've seen it coming the whole time.
Right. It builds a professional rapport where you can warn the client about issues that fall within your appointment early on, and then collaboratively discuss how to deal with them before they explode into a lawsuit.
All right, so let's build the narrative of a disaster here. Let's say we tried.
Okay.
We wrote a watertight contract, we kept perfect daily records of every single forklift movement, we communicated with the client constantly, but a major conflict still happens.
It happens.
And it solidifies into an actual dispute. The project is totally stalled, and people are actively threatening lawsuits. The RICS guide introduces a framework called the 3 Pillars of Dispute Resolution.
Ah, yes, originally defined by Professor Green of Boston University.
Walk me through these. What is our very first line of defense?
The first pillar is negotiation. And the beautiful thing about negotiation is that it is simply the problem-solving efforts of the parties themselves.
So it was bilateral.
Entirely bilateral. You and the other party sit down, usually across a table or just out on a site visit, and try to hash it out.
So no lawyers, no judges, just us trying to be reasonable adults.
Ideally, yes. It's the preeminent mode of resolving issues. The vital characteristic to remember here is that the power to settle the dispute rests entirely in the hands of the disputing parties.
We control the outcome.
You hold all the cards. There is no outside force dictating the terms to you.
But what happens when we simply cannot agree? The contractor is demanding an extra $100 grand, the client says absolutely zero, and negotiation just completely breaks down. What is Pillar 2?
That brings us to mediation and conciliation. This is where we introduce an independent third-party neutral.
Someone to play referee.
Sort of. They step into the room to facilitate the discussion, but, and this is the crucial distinction from the next pillar we'll talk about, they do not impose a binding decision.
Well, they can't force us to do anything.
No. They are there to help you talk, not to act as a judge.
What's fascinating here is how do they actually get the parties to agree if they have zero binding power? I mean, if they can't force anyone to sign a check, why would anyone even listen to them?
That is the magic of the process. Research undertaken by King's College London, actually in association with the Technology and Construction Court, shows that mediation resolves about 35% of all construction disputes that were headed to court.
Wow, over a third, just from talking.
Just from talking. And perhaps more surprisingly, in the vast majority of those cases, it's initiated voluntarily by the parties themselves, not by some court order.
So how do they get these stubborn parties to budge?
They achieve this through a really effective technique called reality testing.
Reality testing. Sounds like a therapy session for construction workers. How does that actually play out in the room?
Well, a good mediator remains completely impartial, obviously, and they won't just suggest a lazy compromise outcome where everyone splits the difference.
Okay, so what do they do?
Instead, they will separate you into confidential, private rooms. During those private sessions with each side, they play devil's advocate.
They grill you.
They absolutely grill you. They push the parties to evaluate their own positions using cold, objective criteria.
Like the site records?
Exactly. They force you to look at the hard evidence and ask, if this actually goes to court, how strong is your case, really? Look at these emails. Look at these site logs.
So they break down your confidence a bit.
They do. It strips away the emotional posturing and grounds the entire dispute in the actual legal and factual reality of the situation.
Ah, so they essentially show you how badly you're going to lose if you don't compromise right now.
That's a blunt way to put it, but yes.
That sounds incredibly useful. But let's say reality testing fails. Everyone is just too stubborn, egos are too big, emotions are too high, and the mediator just throws their hands up.
Then we hit pillar 3, adjudicative processes.
What happens now?
Now, you are handing over the keys. This is the final resort. A third party steps in, hears the arguments from both sides, and imposes a binding decision on everyone.
So we lose control.
Completely. This covers your litigation in a public court, your private arbitration, and statutory adjudication. When you move to the third pillar, you have lost the power to craft your own compromise. You are bound by the decision of that third party, whether you like it or not.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when you look at that third pillar in the guide, the construction industry has an absolute alphabet soup of boards, processes, and tribunals.
It really is an alphabet soup.
I really want to clarify the specific tools you're going to encounter on the ground, because honestly, it could be overwhelming for someone trying to keep a project moving.
Sure, let's break it down.
Let's start with dispute boards. The RICS guide mentions DRBs and DABs. What is the difference there?
The difference really comes down to that key word we just talked about,
Okay.
binding. Let's look at DRBs first, which are dispute review boards.
Okay.
Typically, 3 members are appointed at the very start of the project, long before any dispute happens.
So they're just hanging around.
They review documents as the project goes on. They visit the site maybe every 3 to 4 months, and they actually get to know the project team and the dynamics.
That sounds proactive.
Very proactive. But crucially, when a dispute does pop up, they only issue non-binding recommendations.
So they are essentially just a built-in mediation panel.
Think of it that way, yeah. The DRB leverages the respect they've earned from the project team over months of site visits to offer a recommendation that the parties usually end up accepting voluntarily.
Makes sense. But contrast that with the dispute adjudication board.
Right, the DAB. They follow a very similar pattern of site visits and familiarization, but when a dispute happens, they issue formal, binding, written decisions.
Okay, so there is a very clear, hard distinction there in the legal weight of their word.
Exactly. And I should note, just to add a little more to the soup, there is also the International Chamber of Commerce's combined dispute boards.
Let me guess, they do both.
You got it. They can actually do it, either issue a non-binding recommendation or a binding decision, depending entirely on what the parties request at the time.
Okay, that distinction makes a lot of sense. But speaking of binding decisions, we absolutely have to talk about adjudication under the 1998 Housing Grants, Construction and Regeneration Act, or the HGCRA.
The HGCRA, yes, a massive piece of legislation.
Reading the guide, the timeline on this process is frankly absolutely terrifying to me. Walk me through what happens when someone hits the big red button under this act.
It is exceptionally fast, and that is intentionally so. The whole goal of the act was to keep cash flowing in the industry, stop people from starving contractors out with endless delays.
Right. So how fast is fast?
Under the act, once a notice of dispute is served, an adjudicator must be appointed within just 7 days.
7 days.
7 days. And once the referral is issued to that adjudicator, they must deliver a binding decision within 28 days.
Wait, 28 days total. That is practically zero leeway. If I haven't been keeping those contemporaneous records of the forklift moving that we argued about back in segment 1, I am completely sunk, aren't I?
You are dead in the water. This is exactly why I stressed those daily records so hard earlier.
It's all connecting now.
Because the referring party, the one actually starting the fight, they might have spent 6 months in secret with a whole team of lawyers preparing a massive, highly detailed claim.
And then they just drop it on my desk.
They drop it on your desk, and once they hit the button, you, as the responding party, have to react immediately. The adjudicator is under an absolute obligation to act impartially and give both sides a fair hearing, sure.
But they're trapped by the clock.
They are completely trapped by that 28-day statutory deadline. It is a full-out sprint. And pristine records are your only armor against an ambush like that.
That is wild. It's essentially just an ambush tactic if you aren't prepared for it.
The courts take a very, very robust attitude toward enforcing these decisions too, so you have to take it incredibly seriously.
Okay, so if adjudication is the sprint, let's look at the marathons. Arbitration versus litigation.
Ah, the heavy hitters.
The Arbitration Act 1996 sets up arbitration as a private tribunal chosen by the parties. It's a final and binding process with extremely limited opportunities to appeal an award.
Correct.
Litigation, on the other hand, is going through the public courts, specifically the Technology and Construction Court, the TCC. Why would a client ever choose one over the other?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the choice often comes down to privacy and expertise versus structural convenience.
Elaborate on the privacy part.
Arbitration is highly prized by large developers because it keeps your dirty laundry private. It is entirely confidential. Nobody else in the industry gets to see the transcripts or the outcome.
Which is huge for reputation.
Massive. Plus, you get to actually choose an industry-qualified arbitrator. You can pick someone who actually understands the structural engineering behind a curtain wall failure, not just a random judge who happens to be assigned your case that week.
That sounds vastly superior. Honestly, why would anyone ever choose public litigation then?
Because of a significant structural warning regarding multi-party disputes.
Multi-party disputes, like when everyone is blaming everyone else.
Exactly. Think about a catastrophic failure, like a massively leaking roof on a huge hospital project.
Okay, nightmare scenario.
Right. The property owner needs to sue both the main contractor who built it and the architect who designed it.
Because they don't know whose fault the leak actually is yet.
Right. If you are in arbitration, unless all your separate contracts have carefully drafted joinder provisions, you simply cannot force everyone into the same room.
Joinder provisions.
Yeah.
Okay, translate that into plain English for me.
Think of a joinder provision like a group chat invite.
Oh, I like that.
If the building leaks, the owner wants the architect and the builder in the same group chat to figure out who is at fault. Without a joinder provision tying all your separate contracts together, you're basically forced to have two completely separate private text conversations.
Oh, that sounds like a disaster.
It is. You have to run one private arbitration against the builder and a totally separate private arbitration against the architect.
And both guys are just going to point the finger at the guy who isn't in the room.
Exactly. In their respective private rooms, they just blame the other guy. That is astronomically expensive to run two trials, and it risks contradictory outcomes where you somehow lose both cases.
So what happens in public court?
In those multi-party scenarios, public court litigation is often much easier because the judge has the inherent power to just bring all the parties together into one single courtroom, regardless of what the individual contracts say.
That group chat analogy is perfect. It makes total sense. So it's not just about keeping things secret. It's about looking ahead at who you might eventually need to drag into the dispute.
Spot on.
Now, as a surveyor, I am often the one caught in the middle of this chaos, right? I'm evaluating the claims that lead up to these disputes.
You're on the front lines. Yeah.
Exactly. The RICS guide breaks claims down into three primary variables: time, money, and quality. Let's talk about the tricky ones. How do we juggle the different types of cost and delay claims without accidentally overpaying a contractor?
You have to draw very clear, hard lines between the concepts. Let's look at time and money first.
Okay.
There's a fundamental difference between prolongation costs and disruption costs. And trust me, contractors love to blur them together.
I've seen that happen.
Prolongation costs are exactly what they sound like. The project has been delayed through no fault of the contractor, their time on site is formally extended, and they are incurring the costs of maintaining their site setup for that extended period.
Right, so I'm stuck paying the rental fee for the site cabin, the security fencing, and the porta potty for an extra 6 weeks, even if nobody is actively building anything.
Exactly. It's just the cost of being there longer. Disruption costs, however, are an entirely different animal.
How so?
With disruption, you might not necessarily need an extension of time, but your actual work has been disrupted. You are working far less efficiently.
Give me an example.
Maybe the client made you work out of sequence, or you had to stop and start your labor force repeatedly because of a permit issue.
So the guys are just standing around waiting.
Yes. You haven't prolonged the overall length of the job. Maybe you still finish by December 1st, but it has cost you significantly more in man-hours to do the exact same amount of work.
Okay, I see the difference.
When you evaluate a claim, you must ensure you understand exactly what is being claimed to avoid double recovery. You do not want a contractor claiming disruption costs under the guise of prolongation, effectively getting paid twice for the same inefficiency.
That is a great distinction to keep in mind. And what about the quality side of things? The guide mentions distinguishing between a temporary disconformity and a permanent disconformity. What does that actually mean when I'm walking the site?
This is a vital distinction for managing cash flow and your own sanity.
I need both of those.
While a contractor is still actively on site and the works are ongoing, if they build something incorrectly, say, a brick wall is slightly out of plumb, it is generally considered a temporary disconformity.
Meaning they can just fix it.
They have the right and the contractual obligation to fix work in progress. You shouldn't immediately panic and declare a massive breach of contract.
Let them do their job.
However, it is only when the project reaches the end and substantial errors are left uncorrected that it becomes a true defect or a permanent disconformity.
So what's the danger there for a surveyor?
The danger is, if you are valuing the works toward the end of a project and the contractor has already been paid 95% of the money but hasn't returned to fix these glaring temporary issues, you might have a massive overvaluation problem on your hands.
Because I already paid them for bad work.
You've given up your financial leverage to make them fix it.
Ouch. So what does this all mean? I'm outdoor on site. I'm analyzing prolongation versus disruption. I'm dealing with disconformities. And suddenly the client turns to me and says, hey, should we get this contractor to a 28-day adjudication, or should we file for arbitration? Where is my boundary as a surveyor?
This is perhaps the single most important warning a mentor can ever give you. You must know your professional boundaries.
Okay, lay it on me.
If a surveyor provides advice on dispute resolution mechanisms, the courts will hold you to a very, very strict standard.
But wait, I'm not a lawyer. Surely the judge looks at my hard hat and cuts me some slack.
Absolutely not. They will not apply a lesser standard to you simply because you are a surveyor and not a solicitor.
Seriously?
Yes. If you hold yourself out as having the knowledge to advise a client on legal dispute mechanisms, like telling them arbitration is definitely better than litigation for this specific case, the court will hold you to the exact same standard of care as a reasonably competent, appropriately qualified legal professional.
Wow. So if I give bad legal advice, I can't just throw my hands up and say, hey, I'm just a surveyor. I actually get sued for professional negligence at the standard of a lawyer.
You do. And I'm guessing your standard surveyor's professional indemnity insurance won't cover you playing pretend lawyer.
Definitely not.
You must ensure your organization has the appropriate insurance for that kind of specific advice, which most do not. The ultimate, safest advice I can give you is to know when to call in the cavalry.
Pass the buck to the lawyers.
It's not passing the buck. It's protecting your client. Your greatest value to your client is not pretending to be their legal counsel. Your value is recognizing when a dispute is escalating beyond your technical expertise and advising them to seek specialist legal or consultant assistance early.
Don't wait for the fire to spread.
You not wait for a sudden crisis. Strategic legal advice obtained early is far more effective and honestly far more economical than hiring a legal team in an absolute panic because a 28-day adjudication notice just landed on your desk and the clock is ticking.
That is incredibly sobering, but highly practical advice. Stay in your lane or pay the price.
Precisely.
All right, let's wrap up the key lessons we've unpacked for you today. First, the best dispute is the one that never happens. Eliminate ambiguity before you start. Avoid the trap of letters of intent. Write clear contracts tailored to the actual project and maintain relentless contemporaneous records of resource movement.
Even if it means tracking a forklift in the rain.
Even in the rain. Second, if a dispute arises, know your pillars. Understand if you are engaging in a bilateral negotiation where you hold the power, utilizing a non-binding mediator for some hard reality testing, or handing your fate over to a binding adjudicative process.
The alphabet soup.
Right. Third, know that alphabet soup. Understand the lethal ambush speed of HGCRA adjudication and the privacy benefits versus multi-party limitations of arbitration compared to public litigation. And finally, stay in your lane. Evaluate claims accurately. Distinguish between delay and disruption, but never, ever give legal advice that exposes you to professional negligence. Call in the specialists early.
This raises an important question, though, doesn't it?
What's that?
Well, if arbitration is so highly prized by the biggest players, specifically because it keeps disputes strictly confidential and private, what happens to the construction industry's collective ability to learn from its mistakes?
Oh, wow.
Right. If all the biggest, most expensive project failures, the most complex multi-million-dollar engineering defects are just hidden away behind closed doors and confidential arbitration awards, are we doomed to keep repeating the exact same contractual and engineering errors forever?
That is a profound tension.
It's a real conflict between the immediate privacy needs of the client and the long-term advancement and safety of the entire industry.
That is a fascinating and honestly slightly terrifying thought to leave on. The price of our privacy might just be industry-wide amnesia.
Something for you to ponder.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the RICS Practice Information Guide. We really hope you can take these tools, apply them to your daily site logs, stay out of the legal crosshairs, and keep your own projects running smoothly. We will see you next time.